Hi guys, welcome to another Facehammer video. It's me, Russ the Faceville, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Warhammer the Old World news. An article's just gone live on Warhammer Community about the matched play guide, and I thought I would just look at that and react to it and talk about a little bit more about Facehammer GT, which is on the 6th and 7th of September, Element Games in Stockport. I keep forgetting I've now got to explain which one because there's multiple, because Byron's empire is expanding, so it's going to be ran there, and details of that will go up very soon. I've kind of been waiting for an FAQ to drop or something, which obviously we've got some clarity on that now as well, and I will be using this match play guide most likely for my event, so until that's out, the pack will be a little bit bare bones. I want to try and sell tickets in June, and I'll let you know those details as soon as I've got them. They'll be available on the Element Games website itself, and it's probably about 40-50 players at the moment. If I get a very high demand, I will increase it, but I need to talk to the venue because I think I've put the whole hall at the moment, but I'm going to have to reduce that. Anyway, without further ado, let's just talk about the article. Here we go. So here's the article that's just gone live on Warhammer Community. Basically, it talks about match play guide and ways to play. And what's cool about this is there's actually going to be a physical book, not just a PDF, a match play guide. And again, with the lovely crest on the front of that book, which is really nice. And basically saying that this is going to give lots of suggestions about how to play, and people who've been playing Age of Sigmar or 40k might see some of these terms and kind of understand them. I don't think it's like a general's handbook style. I don't expect to see any points adjustments and things like that. I think it's literally just scenarios, suggestions, ways to play, and it looks like there's some options and you can probably choose which ones you want. So there's open war, grand melee, combined arms. They've got different restrictions on characters and units. There's 6 match play scenarios, which is pretty cool. Optional, secondary, and secret objectives. Now, if you don't know, back in the day, like when I was running South Coast GT with Dan and Wayne, we would come up with ideas like secret missions, where you had like a pack of missions, and then before the game you would use one, and they were one and done in the event, and then you would basically then score your 20-0 system, but it would be like up to 16 or 15 or whatever, and the extra points were secret missions, or we would use them as tiebreakers in brackets of win, loss, draw. There's lots of ways you can do it, so I think they're really cool, and you've all got the same set, and you can only pick the same one once in an event usually, so it might be similar to that. And I think as well, you've got secondary, which looks like they're like optional things. Maybe they give you extra VPs, or they're actually like a thing you can use as a scoring bracket differentiator. So I know before I did an event where we had actual in the 20-0, like the 4 points at the end were, did you get yours, did you deny theirs, that kind of thing. So yeah, extra interesting to see that. I mean, I know that, and what's nice about this is it does force lists to be a little bit more diverse, and it's not just about points protection and points grabbing, and also it sometimes encourages a little bit more positive play rather than avoidance on things like that. I mean, I think the way the old world is designed, like core rules mechanics wise, avoidance is actually quite a hard way of playing, just because it is quite, you can get hold of stuff, and like fleeing and rallying isn't as punishing as it used to be. Panic's not as punishing as it used to be. Units are kind of stick around a bit longer, so I think you can design armies a little bit, it does play a little bit better into the point system, just vanilla out the box. So you can see here they've got the contents page, which we'll look at because why not. You've got I don't know what these are, but they just talk about, obviously I don't know have any detail other than this. So it's got that organising a tournament scoring, so hopefully I have some different methods, victory points and rankings, so hopefully that's gives some ideas to how to run different things. Army composition, so it looks like there might be some restrictions. I mean, we've seen GW events like the Warhammer World, I've gone to a lot of them, like you can max free of anything and things like that. I know the independent scene, there's been loads of stuff like can't have multiple level 4s, you can't spend more than 500 points on a unit, things like that. So who knows what's in here, but I'm hoping that there's some really cool restrictions, which take the edge off some of the stuff that's very strong at the moment. And obviously there's hinting in the article later on, which I'll get to, about the FAQ, so that might address some of those things as well. But really the best thing about these scoring systems, or different scoring or secret missions, is they shift the meta of composition. So it's harder to just take a net list, because the list has to be kind of refined or redesigned a bit to fit into that new system. Like if tournaments started running the scenario where you break when your banners go, like sort of a lot of the MSU kind of non-banner lists would disappear, and you'd have to do a little bit different. But anyway, that's besides the point. There's something about the field of battle, so that's probably something to do with terrain setup, maybe. I don't know. You got the match play scenarios, and it's got the names here. So we've got Upon the Field of Glory, King of the Hill, which sounds like a Capture the Middle type one. Drawn battle lines, close quarters. You might be quite close together. A chance encounter, so that might be some disruption about how you're set up. I don't know. Encirclement, that sounds like you might be surrounded. That's kind of sounded interesting. I mean, I remember back in the old days, there was a scenario which was it was a very narrative favorite. It was called Last Stand, and your opponent had double the points you had, and all you had to do was kill, I think, a certain amount, and then you're okay. And then their units recycled as well. And it was quite a cool scenario to play. We did that quite a lot when I worked at GW in the shop on games nights and game weekends, because it allowed people just to come in with their units and run into the attacking force as and when, so people could get their models out if they were a little bit late, or so it did work really well. Or you can take that unit over now because they're dead. You can bring them back on, little Zach or whatever. You take those. There's a thing about secondary objectives, and that's quite a few pages, obviously, between the two things, so that looks like it's going to be quite extensive. Then you've got doubles events, and you've got 3 double scenarios. So I'm actually going to the doubles event in August with Dean, and we're doing dwarfs. I'm going to do a show on that. Our lists are kind of a bit of fun. We just the restrictions on that event are really interesting, and he's painting his dwarfs like flying through it. I've barely started, but I've been collecting 4th, 5th edition 1992 Marauder miniatures and harassing people on eBay, trying to recreate my childhood army. So I've amassed a huge collection, and obviously I've already got the army I need, but I'm expanding out. So I got the very old metal gyrocopters, and I've been using paint stripper, and yeah, so I'm really looking forward to spending a bit more time with the short bearded ones, because I absolutely love painting dwarfs. They're one of the things I used to really enjoy. I found it so relaxing. The models are so characterful and iconic. I'm thinking about doing a show about with the old army books, because I've got all the old army books still all the way through. And I'm thinking about doing a show about the project itself and the army and things that I love about it. It might be a little bit, I don't know, too personal to me, but maybe it's interesting for you guys. Let me know if it's something you're interested in. And I could always revisit other factions as well in the same way. I've definitely got stronger connections to some than others. Yeah, that would show through in my content already, most likely. Anyway, so you've got the doubles events. So you've got double envelopment, forward battle lines, and the old outpost. The old outpost sounds interesting. I don't know if that's going to be like a watchtower style type one. Maybe one person's in the outpost, the other people's a relief force. Who knows how that would work? But I'm excited to see some different missions. I hope they're not too what I would call modern, like too Age of Sigmar or 40k, because I find that like actual fighting a battle, like a traditional battle, isn't important. It's more about standing on circles and dancing and doing hokey pokeys or whatever. So I actually really like the imagery of a traditional battle, and you're using units in a kind of war, in sort of ancient battle techniques. I think that's one of the great things about the current version of Old World, is that some of those Warhammer Ancients rules have come into the fantasy game, and Magic's kind of been, it's very strong, but it's been downplayed from game winning to enhancing or supporting. And you need to use more traditional tactics in your play, which I more of that is great. I don't want to see the other way. It would get moved more fantastical, more random, and more, you know, not about actually fighting or winning the field of battle. It should always be about winning the table. That's kind of classic battles. That's how they should be. Anyway, I'm rambling. So in the bottom of the article, it just says there's a separate section on doubles events, we've just talked about. It says rules for competition, alliances and scenarios, potential contradictions. And there's guidance for running team events and escalation events where your army grow as the tournament goes on. That would be quite interesting. So maybe you start with like 500 or 1,000 points and you end up with 2,000. That's quite an interesting concept. If you have to build on a base army, so you can't just rewrite the whole list, you've got to kind of write a list that grows. I think I've done that. We've done that with like campaign style gaming before. So you can't just completely abandon the units that were effective at 500 points. You've got to have them in your 2,000. So you kind of have that dichotomy of, do I invest in units in my 500 and just try and use them later on? Or do I sacrifice the power level of my lower level army, knowing that I want those choices in my higher army and they'll be better then, you know, so you're playing more for the later games. So it's an interesting one. But it says the match play guide is a one-stop shop for all your competitive match play needs. And it's pre-orders fairly soon. So we don't know when that is. But I mean, I think with Beastman now being out, we've now got all our factions out apart from Cafe, which is mentioned that they should be coming soon. Obviously, we've had the Horus Heresy announcement, so it's either going to have to happen before that or after. And I think that looks like it's touted around summer, which is normally there's a big release in summer. So if it's before, we're looking at like next month or month after, like July, which would be amazing if it is then. And then if this comes out and the FAQ, then that would feel like version 1 of the game where everything's released, everything's been FAQ'd and tidied up after 18 months or, you know, of what I would call thorough meta-defining play and the community making house rules and things. So, I mean, it's really nice that the scene's been able to settle to a level where informed decisions on those changes can be made rather than knee-jerk decisions, which is one of the things that turned me off Age of Sigmar, where there's always something broken and there's lots of knee-jerk reactions and armies become invalidated, and the churn of competitive play where tabletop skill is lesser important than being able to recycle your collection and collect the broken thing before it gets fixed, which to me isn't really tactical wargaming. That's like collectible card games, but you have to sit and paint the models and it doesn't really fit the ethos. And I think someone said in the comments before about they like that I paint as well as game, and I like to have a nice painted army, so I don't want to just churn through models. And I had to compromise my painting quite a lot during the Age of Sigmar years, and do a lot of dry brush contrast. Although they look good and I got nominations, they weren't up to my standard and they were always felt like unfinished, with the exception of like my Stormcast Dragons and some of my Nurgle stuff. But then that was coming back to 8th edition and end times. So yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. So yeah, and it says here it will land alongside a new FAQ and errata document, which brings a few targeted changes to rules of the game, and more of that from the rules dragons soon. I don't know if that's a hint that something's going to happen to dragons, but they obviously need to have something to curtail them a little bit. Obviously, we've seen some comp like 500 point caps and stuff that hurt the Chaos Dragon, but I mean, and the important thing as well is not to invalidate them and completely shift the meta. I think that was the big mistake for people who played Age of Sigmar when we had the original, I want to say it was in AOS3, the original sort of missions, and it was very monster focused. And then the next set were completely on their heads. And some armies became a lot weaker, like Gargants become extremely weak. But then the rules for the new Gargant book felt like they were written with the power of the handbook at the time, which was the monster one. So actually they got a double nerf hit and they just become pretty trash. And like for me, I really, and that's the beauty of the slower pace of Old World and the sort of the maturity in how things can mature. And you can see, and I know there's been some criticism about the frequency, or they're not doing enough too soon, not enough quickly enough. But I'm in my head, I've been around long enough to remember the days of 7th, 8th edition where things happened not at all, or very, very, very slowly. And actually the community picked up the slack. And we've seen some people in the community race to do things. Like there's been those renegade lists that I think the squared base guys have done. And that's all really cool stuff. And I think that hopefully we can be in a position where there's community-based events, but also officially we've got a set of rules which are going to work at a competitive level without community intervention. And I think, and to be more inclusive of different factions and units. So I'm really interested to see what happens with that FAQ and errata. So I will cover that in detail when it's out. And I've kind of been holding off doing full faction reviews because obviously there was something coming with until every faction is properly released, you can't really understand the meta. So I want to do a tier list, and I want to also talk about factions in their entirety with their infamy armies. So I'm probably going to start timing that with the new FAQ drop, because that may affect the decisions of where things are right now. That probably shift. So I want to do it from the perspective of this is the new baseline. Let's see where I think they're going to be, and then review that again in 12 months or whatever, after some events have been out and we've seen some results and we've seen some factions. It's going to be really interesting to see how Cathay shape the meta. Obviously, it's the first time we've had a brand new faction for Old World or Warhammer for a very long time. I'm trying to remember what the most recent one would have been. Maybe Ogre Kingdoms, because I know we had the White Dwarf Presents Chaos Dwarfs, and you could say that they got a re-release. But the Ogre Kingdoms, was that the whole brand new range that was the latest one? I can't think of anything else. I know we've had Kislev in the past, Dogs of War, things like that, but they were just, I think Kislev were just alternate models. I think they did have some rules as well, going back in the day, but I don't think we've had a new range for that long. And Ogre Kingdoms, that's going to be going back to where they were released when I worked for Workshop, so that's at least like 20 odd years ago. So that'd be amazing if with a new faction. And what's going to be really interesting is how we've seen it in Total War, and we've seen some tidbits, we've seen the models which look amazing, is how that really affects the meta. They're probably going to be quite limited in range because they're new. So it's a bit like in AOS when like Deep King come out, or when other factions came out that were brand new. Names are escaping me now all of a sudden, like Ossiarch Bone Reapers or things like that. You have a very limited selection of units because normally on a release there's a restriction on how much they can actually make for that new range. So if you've got to make the heroes, the special character, the units, so you've got like infantry, cavalry, the big monster thing, the characters. I think everything that's been revealed is probably all the range that we're going to see. So actually within that very small selection of units, you've got to have enough to be competitive. So it's going to be a really interesting 6 months when Cathay hit, of that initial power spike with the unknown, if people don't know how to play against them or what they do, and then settling into, do they have the diversity within the book to adapt to changing meta? Because we've even seen meta changes in current Old World from the release to now, and I think now Travel Mystical Pathways is the hotness now. There's a lot of talk about that, and obviously what I like about Old World is there is a meta shift all the time, but it's a pace, so it's easier for people to kind of find their way. And I think you really get to the bottom layers of factions and books where you start to find those new nuances. Whereas if you're just skimming the top power all the time because it's churning all the time, you never really deep dive into your faction as much as you would do. Anyway, that's a big side note. But anyway, that's the article. You can read it for yourself. It's on Warhammer Community. You've probably already read it. They're my thoughts. So channel wise, I'm going to be doing faction reviews. I want to probably do my dwarf journey because I think that's cool. I'll do a video on the doubles, probably pre-event with Dean, talk through our list, talk about our experiences getting ready, going with a couple of other friends as well that are taking, I think, Wood Elves and Empire. One of them's first foray into Old World. They're learning the game, so we're trying to teach them. So we've had a couple games. We had a doubles game the other day, but they used vampires and trolls because they didn't have their armies ready. Turns out dwarves have a lot of flaming attacks, which didn't really go well for the trolls, but it was good fun to have Will and Matt over for having a bit of a game. So we want to do that again, so obviously get the knowledge of how to play. I mean, we're going for a bit of a giggle. The doubles event at Warhammer World is a bit more about, it's a third of gaming, a third of sports, a third of painting, so it's not like we're not taking it super seriously competitive. But we'll still talk about it, and I want to show off like what the event itself. I'm really looking forward to that. We're all traveling up together. It's going to be an amazing weekend. So that's the end of August. Got the Pompey event, which is UG Hobbies. That's in mid-August. I'll put a link to that. There's still tickets for that. That's 2,000 points. Normal, what I would call competitive Warhammer. I would probably take my warriors to that if I was thinking about painting up my dwarfs to a level where I had 2,000 points to take, but I'm not sure about that. I'll have the time to do that, and I don't want to rush these models as they are vintage, and they're sort of 10 to 15 pounds a model, whatever you paid for them, which is a silly amount of money. But I've had some deals, but it's been a lot to recreate the lists and have all the options I wanted, and go through the back of in the old books. They had the old catalogue with all the pictures, and I've gone through and tried to collect most of those. I haven't gone down the Marauder Longbeards and stuff. I've taken the ones from 6th, 7th edition, the metals, because I really like those ones. But anyway, that's my hobby project. So, and I'm going to do some full faction reviews. Beastman will come as soon as I get the book. I didn't get sent the book. I had a PDF, but unfortunately, when I went to do the show, it was removed. So I think because there was something swapped around, or they were meant to be earlier. But anyway, that's besides the point. So I will do a Beastman review when I get the Arcane Journal, and do some faction deep dives. But I kind of want to do that once the FAQ drops, because I think that's going to be the time when that's going to establish the meta for a solid period of time from that release, alongside the match play guides. We see what tournaments are going to look like, and that's going to affect as well. So I'm kind of waiting for that, but watch this space. There will be a lot of old world content coming, so don't worry. I really appreciate everyone who's supporting after my big absence break, and still sort of dealing with some real life stuff. But this is now at the point where it's manageable, so I'm hoping that I can continue to release content on a regular basis. Hopefully you've seen that over the last couple of weeks. Watch this space, and as soon as there's more information about the FAQ errata and the match play guide, that'll definitely go straight up. Cool. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. And don't forget, Facehammer GT 6th, 7th of September. Tickets will be on sale at Element in June. But watch this space. I'll announce it on the channel and also through Discords and things like that. So thanks for watching, guys. Catch you next one.